Keith Rucker here at VintageMachinery.org. So today I thought what we'd do is we would shoot a little video talking about a Brown and Sharpe type dividing head. And this is a a topic that has come up out of request from actually multiple viewers on my channel who have seen this dividing head kind of sitting in the background of some of my videos and have asked me about it. We've had some conversations over email and over the comment board on YouTube concerning this dividing head, and specifically I've had a couple of requests from people to show how to disassemble this item and put it back together, because they have either identical or very similar Brown Sharpe type dividing heads that they picked up, and needing to take them apart and just do a good cleaning on them, and where they've just gotten old or what have you and just need to be gone through. And I've got some experience in doing that. So real quickly, the backstory on this dividing head. So several years ago, I had a machinist vise that I had up for sale, and I had posted it somewhere or another, I don't even remember where, but a gentleman in North Carolina contacted me about it and wanted to buy it. And I was actually going to be traveling through North Carolina, so I carried it up there with me on the trip, and I stopped by a shop. We had a great visit. And we had agreed upon a price or whatever. Well, while I was there, he just asked me, he said, "Is there anything in particular you're looking for?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm kind of looking for a dividing head." And he said, "Well, I may have a deal for you." So he had this dividing head, but there was a catch. It had been completely disassembled. It was in a box, and it was completely taken apart. And when he acquired it, he actually acquired it just like that. It was in this box, and it was completely taken apart. He told me, he said, "Look, I don't know if all the parts are there or not. I was told by the person that I got it from that everything was in there, but I can't tell you." He said he told me he actually tried to put it together a couple of times and wasn't able to figure out how to get it together. He finally gave up, threw it in the box. One thing led to another. We ended up making a swap. I swapped in the vise and took a chance on the dividing head and brought it home with me. So when I got it home and had some time, I would come out to the shop in the evenings, and over the course of about a month, I finally figured out how to put this thing back together. And it was no easy job. Again, I had a bucket of parts, and I was able to find a parts diagram online, actually on my VintageMachinery.org website. A gentleman had posted a manual for this that had an exploded view, but the manual was actually for an import clone of this, and it wasn't exactly the same, but I kind of got the gist of how some things went together. And anyway, I was able to get it back together. I was very fortunate out of the whole thing. I was missing one screw up here on the front, which I still haven't replaced, and it was missing the direct index plate that goes on here, which is actually something that I can make at some point in time, and I just haven't done it. That's where it's got holes. You got this little piece here that engages in holes, and instead of using the dividing plate on the side, if it's a common division, you just kind of directly index using the pin. You just put this pin in there and lock it in place, and it indexes it. So anyway, that was really all that was wrong with it. Well, there was one other little small pin. A little pin was missing out of this piece here that locks the index plate in place, and I made one out of a drill bit. I took a little number drill bit that was the right size, cut it off, and epoxied that in place and replaced that pin. But anyway, enough on that. We're going to show you how to tear into this thing and take it apart. But before we do get into it, I do want to just briefly discuss this type of dividing head, just so you'll understand. Brown and Sharpe started making these, I think, in the early 1900s. They may have started making them late 1800s. I don't know the exact date, but I know for a fact they were making these in the early 1900s. And it was a very good design. It was such a good design that as soon as the patents ran out on this, everybody started making clones of it. Kind of like they do now on a lot of things. So you have a successful design and everybody starts copying it. This particular one, I don't believe is actually a Brown and Sharpe. I think this is an early clone. It's an old one. This one has been around for quite some time. There's some telltale signs on here that this one is old, and I'm guessing it's probably pre-1950, I'm guessing, just by a few little hints that I've been able to pick up along the way. I don't know who made it. It's not stamped or anything, but I have seen and actually worked on some of the old original Brown Sharps, and they are marked Brown and Sharpe. Even today, you can still buy a clone of this dividing head. There are several import companies that are making these over in China, and you see them on eBay. You see them in a lot of the discount catalogs, and even in like Travers or whatever. You can look and actually buy a clone of this made by, or they're sold by multiple companies, and they're still basically the same dividing head that Brown and Sharpe designed, you know, probably close to 100 years ago, if not over 100 years ago. They made 3 different models, 3 different sizes. Really, I guess 3 different sizes, but mostly 2 sizes, and then there was a variation on the larger one here. And the most of the two sizes that are unique. They're just for doing straight dividing, so you can just, you know, do your different angles that you want to do. But they also made a universal type, and that's the type this is. And it's got some gearing on the side, and it actually has a place where you can put a gear on the back, and you can actually put this on a milling machine, gear it to the feet on the table, and what it allows you to do is spiral milling, so or like spiral gears. So as you index it, for each time you index it, as the table is moving along, it's turning this gear, which is actually turning the front down here, so you get that spiral gear. So this is the, you know, I guess it was the Cadillac model. It will do either both simple dividing or the compound dividing as for spiral dividing. And that's the one I have here. Now, as far as how they work and how you take them apart, you know, really the only difference between them is, you know, this one's got this gearbox on here. It's got a couple of extra parts, but the inside of it is basically the same. So even if you don't have this exact model, it's going to be very similar. So now let's get in here and start tearing this thing apart. Alright, so let's start tearing into this. First thing we want to do is go ahead and take the indexing plate off, and we'll start by loosening this nut on the end here. So the nut comes off. There's a little brass washer bushing on there. This little piece here just kind of tightens down and holds the whatever you call this. I can't think of the name of it right now, but the indexing piece here. So we'll pull this up, and so this is spring loaded, and we just pull that out, and that allows us to slide that piece out of that. So now there is a clip on here that kind of clips everything in place, that goes on past this. We'll go ahead and pull that washer off. And we're just going to take a screwdriver. Alright, so now we're going to pull off this little indexer here, that little quadrant piece. And then you can see the screws that actually hold the index plate in place. So we'll get a screwdriver and pull those off. And the index plate should come off. Now if you have the universal type, get this off and I'll show you. There's this little piece right here, and all this does is it's got a little pin in here, and that engages the back of this plate. And basically when you're not doing spiral milling, this whole piece here will turn as it's spiraling, and that's fine. But when you're not doing spiral milling, you don't want to turn, and what happens is this little thing here is spring loaded. It comes out and it engages in one of the holes, the pins. That pin engages in one of the holes on the index plate, and that will keep it from spinning. I'm going to go ahead and twist it back in there and just hold it out of place right now. So Next, we're going to go ahead and pull off the gearbox here. And there's 3 screws holding that in place. Okay, with those off, it may not want to just come right off. There's actually some pins that pin down into this thing, and you have to get those out as well. So there was originally 2. Now I've only got 1 in mine. I don't know what happened to that one, but it's not really that important. But you may have to take a screwdriver or something and get behind this and kind of pry that out. These pins are real good and tight. So, you know, if you need to take this apart, I'll tell you what, we'll just go ahead and do it. There's a nut here. And that should, there's 2 gears in there, so we need to take this one out here first. Using a soft blow hammer there, and that pulls that out. And all this right here will probably, I think, come out together. These gears are meshed in there together, so they're going to have to come out together. Go, and all that comes out. So there's 2 gears on this one. That piece there just fits in there, spins on that. There we go. All right, this is a piece that lets you read a scale on here for the angle. And we'll go ahead and pull that out. And again, this has got a pin in it. So in addition to the screw, see the pin? So that can be kind of difficult to get out. Just not, don't try to knock it out sideways. Be very careful with it. Alright, so now there's 2 screws holding this guard in place. This little brass guard there on the front. And this should just come right off. And this piece up here, there's actually a nut on the inside that holds this, so don't try to take this off. You can start turning this and it will loosen up, but it's very likely that that nut will not come out. It'll just spin on the inside. And also you don't want to screw it all the way out, because then that nut will fall down into the bottom of this and can give you some problems as you try to pull the rest of it apart. So that's all on this side now, so we're going to flip it around to this side. We'll pull the lock knob out. This engages onto the spindle on the inside to lock it in place. And there's a little brass piece in there so the steel does not actually go right up against the edge of that. So it's not coming out, but it shouldn't be in the way. But just know there's a little brass piece in there. Alright, so now we're going to loosen up the knobs here. So there's 2 knobs on this. I don't know if you can see that in the video or not, but there's an inside knob and an outside knob, and they both do different things. If you turn the outside knob, what it does, you see this piece over here? That's on a cam. And what that is doing is when this up, it's actually engaging a worm gear in the bottom of the drive here, and that worm gear is what actually turns or allows this to turn when you're spinning this. So we see when I turn my handle, it's actually turning the nose spindle up here. If I turn this back, it disengages that worm gear, and now when I turn it, it's not doing anything, and the actual spindle here will spin by hand. So if you're doing direct indexing using the plate on the front that mine doesn't have, you would want to disengage this, and you would do that by turning this outside knob and just rotating that down. If you can't get it to turn though, there's an inside knob here. What this inside knob does is it actually tightens up a lock on the inside of the spindle that locks this in place. So if this is in place, now it won't turn, it's locked. So I unscrew this, and we'll see how that works in a minute. It loosens that up, and now this should be turning. There it goes. It was just hung right there a little bit. So there you go. That's how these two knobs work. And we'll go ahead and pull this side off. So there's just a nut holding that in place. Pull the nut off. Okay, so the outside wheel comes off first, and there's a little pin in here that actually engages into. There's two shafts in here, an inside one and an outside one. So now we'll pull the outside one out. You see that gear? That gear is what actually turns that lock nut on the inside. And then I think we're going to leave that in place for right now, because we might need to make sure, as we take the spindle out, that might come in handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have the worm gear disengaged. So I'm going to make sure that it's not turning, that my nose is free spinning, and I think I'm actually just going to go ahead, while I got that apart, I'm going to lock it in place so that it doesn't go anywhere. There we go. And now what we want to do is prepare to take the whole spindle out. We'll start on the back. There's a nut here that kind of takes up the slot. And this is normally there would be a spanner wrench that would fit this. Two pins go in here. I don't have the right size spanner wrench, but I got a punch that fits that. And it's, you know, you can come in here and get it going. Once it gets loose, usually you can spin this off by hand now. I'm going to actually engage the spindle right there to kind of get this going, because it's tight. So if you haven't had yours apart in a while, you know, you may have to really put some torque on that to get it going out. I've had this one apart recently, so it's coming apart pretty well. But that comes right off, and there is a thrust washer in here. And this is, notice there's some grooves in here. Those grooves will go to the inside, and that's just oil grooves to give some lubrication down in there. And that's to take the thrust out of this, to keep that spindle from coming in and out. Take the in play out of it. Alright, we'll flip it around to the front now, and there should be 3 screws. I'm missing one here, but we're going to take these screws out. And note that this whole assembly, it's got this flange around here, and this flange is actually pressed in here. It's a pretty tight fit, so it's not just going to come right out. You're going to have to either use a press or put some shock on it with a hammer. So I don't really have a press here to do that with, so what I'm going to do for right now is we're going to turn it around and we're going to just knock it out. But you never want to hit this directly with a hammer. We want to put something soft in between there. A block of wood, a piece of brass. I've got a piece of brass that should keep it from marring. And I'm going to take a pretty good sized hammer. And we're going to tap on that and turn it around this way. Hopefully you can see this piece coming out as I'm tapping it. There we go. So now the spindle is out. Alright, so I'm going to actually zoom you guys in here and let you hopefully, there's that little brass piece that goes in that lock. It fell out there. Good. Alright, I'm going to zoom you down in here and hopefully you can see down in here and get a better feel for how this works down the inside. Let's see if we can get you in there. Sometimes it helps to understand how this stuff is working so you can understand what's going on when you're trying to take it apart. So if you remember, there's two knobs on the side. Let me move that over so you get to see those in there. The two knobs on the side. When I turn this inside, when the one that has the little holes in there that a spanner wrench fits into, you see that's actually spinning. There's a little gear in here, and what that gear is threaded on there. Threaded in there, and when you tighten that up, it actually locks the spindle in place. You loosen that up and now the spindle will turn. So it's locked and I can't really move that spindle in and out at all. Okay, I loosen that up and now you see the cam moving up and down, that cam engaging and disengaging. So understand how these two functions work. You know, I got it down now, I lock it, it's not moving. I loosen that up and now I can move it up and then lock it back in place. Alright, so now let's go ahead and take all this inside part out. I was trying to take this knob off earlier, but as you see, we actually want to wait to do that now. So I'm going to go ahead, we'd already loosened this nut, we'll take it off, take the outside knob off. When you do that, you can push here, and this little gear will come all the way through. That's the gear that actually turns the cam on the other side. And now, this piece here will come out as well. Alright, so we've got those out. Next we want to loosen this big nut here. And what this is again a thrust washer or thrust adjustment to take the linear movement out of this shaft coming in here. And it just tightens up and puts a little pressure in there. You get it's tight enough so that you don't have any end play in this, but loose enough that this knob will turn, this shaft will turn. So to get this loosened up, there's a screw on the front, and the screw on the front tightens down on there to keep it from backing out. So it's very important that you loosen this up before you try to unscrew this bolt over here. If you're trying to unscrew the thrust cap here, it's not going to want to come out, and you'll just waste a lot of effort. So now I'm just going to unscrew this. And that comes out again. You see we have the little oil holes in here to let some oil get in there on that end thrust bearing. So now back around over on this side, there's this little piece right here. It's just a little, what? We're going to have to put this back in here and loosen up the nut because it was too tight. Alright, so we got that loosened up. So now you see this moves, and there's I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a little piece in here that limits how far this cam will move, and we need to take that out. It's just got a screw. And then there's the limiter, this little piece here. Alright, so now this thing will turn beyond the range that it's really designed to turn. And what you have to do now is you have to position this so that this big worm gear lines up with the hole here and it comes out. So if the cam is down out of the way, it won't come out. It gets in the right position, it comes out. Alright, getting close, guys. So now we're going to loosen up that nut on the inside that tightens everything up. It comes off. Again, there's a little thrust washer behind that. Not a thrust washer, but a washer behind it. And that's just about ready to come out, but first we have to remove this. And to do that, we're going to use a socket to come in here and loosen this nut. It's a 7/8 inch socket on mine. And when you do that, this whole piece here comes out, the gear comes out. We'll just leave it there so I can remember how it goes back together. Obviously, if you're doing this and you need to clean it, take all that apart, clean it up real good. And now the cam piece comes out. And that's pretty much how to take this apart. There's a few things here. So up here on the top, I'll just move the camera so you can see that a little bit better. So up here on the top, you see there's this little knob, and when you push that forward, it engages the direct index plate on the front, which again mine doesn't have. If you have to take this apart, there's two screws here. This outside screw just goes in. This has just a little notch in it, and there's a screw that goes in there, and that keeps this from coming out. The second screw here, there is a ball bearing and a spring in there, and what you have is in this shaft in here, there's a couple of little detents, little holes in there that ball bearing will go into, and it will catch it in one of these two positions. I'm not going to take it out, but that's how that works. So you'll have to take both of these out, but be careful when you take this out that you get both the screw and the ball bearing. And then the other thing that you can do is this whole piece here will rotate around to whatever angle you want. And to loosen that up, there's two bolts here. You loosen these up, and then you can adjust this to whatever angle. Again, if yours is real dirty and cruddy, been around a while, come in here and clean these ways up real good first. You know, get a wire brush or something like that in there to get all the rust and stuff out. Oil it up real good. And you may have to, again, you know, use a soft load hammer or something to kind of tap it to get it out. But once you get this cleaned up, make sure you oil it real good, and it should go back together really nice. Alright, so that's pretty much the disassembly process. It's all apart now, and to put it back together is pretty much the reverse of what we just showed. So we'll go through those steps real quickly for you. First thing I'm going to do is we're going to put this cam piece back in. You know, make sure as you're doing this, you know, give it some good lube, oil it up real good. This a lot of moving parts in here. We want to make sure everything's oiled, and there's no better time to do that than while you have it apart. And I'm just using a lightweight machine oil here to do that. So we'll put the cam back on. We're going to put our little piece here that limits the travel. And let me find the right screw for that one. And then we'll put the screw back in here. Alright, so while we're right here at this point, let's go ahead and put the lock gear back inside here. And remember, there's a washer that goes in between there, or a little thrust washer here. You know, that's got a good oil on it. We'll put that, slide both of those back over and thread that back on. And I don't want it tight, I just want it loose right now. Okay. Alright, next is the worm gear. And again, there's a little washer in here. But notice on this washer there's a little pinhole in there. And that's going to be real important. You want to put that on there, it goes in here. But this pinhole will actually engage, there's a pin on this cam piece that's in there, and that pinhole has to line up in that pin. So make sure that when you put this back together that it goes back together. So we'll put this in here. Again, we may have to get it lined up. Again, you know, it'll only go in when it's lined up. Okay. I'll tell you what. I like to kind of push that washer out when it goes in here, and that gives me some room in here to make sure I get that pin lined up. Tight quarters. Hopefully my big head's not in the way. Get a little screwdriver to kind of push on the bottom. Okay, that's got the pin lined up there, and that's going all the way down. Alright, so that's in now, and we'll go ahead and put the thrust washer back in, or the thrust plug. I'm going to put some oil on there while I got it apart. And when you tighten this up, what you want to do is tighten it up until it's just touching, and you can take your other hand over here and turn this knob, and you want to get it so that there's no in and out play, but you can easily turn this knob. Okay, if you turn it too far, you're going to have some play in there, and we don't want that play in there. That's the whole purpose of it, is to take that linear movement out. But again, we don't want it tight enough that it's making it difficult to use. That feels good. So now I'm going to tighten up this little screw here, and that right there will lock that thrust piece in place, so that it's going to work real good. So now that we got all this assembled, it's very important now that we remember to put this little gear back onto the side. You know, the first time that I ever did one of these, I got it all back together and then realized that I had forgotten to put on this little piece here that has to be tightened up from the inside, and had to take the whole thing back apart again. So learn from my mistake, very important here. We're just going to put this back in. There is an oil hole here on the top of this. There's a little screw that comes out. You can put oil in, make sure that's up. That goes in here, and we take the nut, tighten it up, and using our socket wrench to reach down in here, we'll just tighten that up. That's good and tight. So now let's make sure that the cam is back out of the way, and we will put the spindle back in. while you got this apart, go ahead and take an opportunity and oil it up real good. We're going to make sure there's plenty of oil, and let's just squirt plenty of oil in here. Can't have too much oil in one of these things, guys. There's 3 holes on this thing. Make sure the one you want up is up. On mine, there's actually a little witness mark on the bottom that was there. If yours didn't have one, you may want to put one on there before you take it apart. Just take a punch or something. And we're going to kind of just put this in here. I'm going to flip this over now to its back. Straight up and down. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that these 3 holes are lined up. Now sometimes you can take a taper punch and kind of, you know, get those kind of roughly where you want it. I'm going to take a soft blow hammer here to start with. Try to get that started down just a little bit. And then I'm going to take the actual screws and make sure that they start before I hammer this thing all the way down. Because if they're not lined up just right, you're going to have to knock it all the way back out. Okay, that one is starting. I know from experience that this one has to go down a little bit deeper before it will actually start. So I'm going to take my brass rod here, little hammer. Let's take those screws, make sure they're going to go. And that side has started now, this side had already started. Alright, we'll go ahead and drive that home. And I can feel it has hit bottom. So we'll go ahead and tighten these up real good and tight. Okay. Alright, next thing we want to do is go ahead and get the thrust washer and nut on the back here. And again, on this thrust washer, there's some little oil grooves. Make sure that that is the side that goes down. And we're going to put some oil on that. We'll put that in there. And then the washer, the nut, goes on the top of that. And here we go. Get this started on here. Next step, we're going to reinsert the piece here that tightens the nut up on the inside. Okay, I can feel that tightening, so we're good. That one goes in first. We'll then get the other side, and there's this piece here that goes through. Put a little hole on that. Alright, and that little gear engages there. Turn back around this side. Now we will put the outside knob on. And again, there's a little pin in there. It only goes in one spot. And where is that spot? There it is. Oops, wrong nut. Wrong way. There we go. Okay, that's working. Very good. Alright, we'll go ahead and put the lock knob back in. Again, make sure you got this little brass piece. We don't want steel on steel going in there. Put that in and then tighten this up. Alright. Put some oil on this shaft here and this gear. Right now it's not engaged, and then when the cam comes up, those gears engage there too. And that's for doing the spiral milling. And again, you can stop that by using this little pin here in the front of your index plate. Alright. So next we need to reassemble our piece here that holds the spiral gears. And if you notice again in here, there's this bevel gear that turns at 90 degrees. So there's the two-piece gear goes here with the bevel gear going down. I've got the shaft out, so I got some wiggle room. And then the other bevel gear will then drop down in there. Notice we got a little boss coming off one side. That side goes to the outside here. Okay? So next we'll come in here, we'll drop the pin in place. It's got that holding in now, and then the drive shaft goes in here. There's a key on this inside gear, so we need to make sure that lines up. I'm going to put some oil on that while I got it apart. There we go. Go ahead and put these nuts back on. Alright. That is turning. And now this will go back on. Remember, there's some pins in here, guys, that kind of index this into place. Turn that up there. And make sure our gears are meshing like they're supposed to. That's it right there. And there's 3 screws that hold all this in place. Alright, we're getting real close, guys. Now at this point we want to put our little guard back on. So there's 2 screws that hold that in place. And now we're ready to put the index plate back on. There we go. There's 3 screws that hold that in, and of course, depending on how many segments you're needing to index, there's 3 different plates that you can put on here with different hole patterns in it. And of course you can swap those out whenever necessary. Alright, so now to keep this plate from turning, we engage this pin on the back. It goes in one of the holes there. Now that's firmly in place. Put the segment on. The clip. There's a little steel washer that goes on the bottom there. Next we put in our index lever. Figure out which row you want it in. Go ahead and get it in one of the hole patterns there. This little slotted bushing goes on next, followed by a brass washer and the nut to hold it all in place. And I think the last step here is we're going to put our little angle gauge back on here. Again, there's a pin that holds that in place. Drop it down in there and tighten up the screw. So there you go, guys. There's the technique for taking apart a Brown & Sharpe type dividing head, putting it back together again. Hopefully somebody out there will find this useful. I realize that many of you probably have no use for this video whatsoever, but just filling in a request from a couple of guys, and hopefully it'll come in handy. If you like what you saw, please hit the subscribe button. If you got any comments, please leave them. I'll read all my comments and try to reply back if you have any questions. Maybe I can give you a hand if you're having some problems with yours. And thank you again for everybody for watching.